Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Costumeco channel. And today I have another amazing costume designer interview. Today with me, I have Mitchell Travers, who is the costume designer of the new series Little House on the Prairie, which is on Netflix right now, and all of episodes are out, so you can go and watch it. But anyway, I am so delighted to welcome Mitchell to my show. Hi, Mitchell.
Hey Heidi, thanks for having me.
I'm really delighted to have you here. Now, you asked me where I am in the world. Where are you in the world? Are you in Winnipeg, Canada?
I'm in Winnipeg, Manitoba. We are in the midst of season two. I'm here on a Saturday, getting costumes out the door. It's a it's a full force production for sure.
I'm really delighted that you're taking some time out to chat with me because I know you're really busy. You're right into the throes of the next season. But we're going to be here for a short while. And while we are, I just wanted to start off by getting to know you a little bit better because I haven't had you on my show before. So, Mitchell, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and how you decided to go into costume design?
For sure. Well, I'm sort of like a wanderer by nature. I've been a New Yorker. I live in Los Angeles. I travel a lot for my career. So I would say I grew up in Massachusetts, and I got the foundations of my career started in New York City, where I was an assistant designer for about a decade, and then I began starting my own small projects and just slowly trying to climb the ladder over time. So I grew up being a fan of costume designers. Some people collect like baseball cards, Pokemon. I was obsessed with, all of the costume designers, and I was trying to study as much as I could about them and follow their work. So I've been a fan of costume design for as long as I can remember, and it's it is truly like how I think and how I dream is through clothes and through personal expression. So as a young person, when I found out that you could have a career that combined history and fashion and storytelling, and it was all the same job, I was like, well, that's definitely what I should be doing.
Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you be able to name who your favorite costume designer is? Would that be hard?
Oh, that is so controversial.
Yeah.
Well, for different reasons. I mean, I feel like, there are the greats, right? Milena, Sandy, Colleen, like all of these
Mhm.
powerhouse, Adrian. There's so many costume designers that I've loved for different reasons. And I mean, the great news is that you need a lot of costume designers because you shouldn't have the same person tell every story. So I am happy that our industry supports a pretty healthy stable of costume designers. I'll say that. But yeah, I think it would be hard to ignore. Like I've never seen a Sandy Powell film that I wasn't just jaw dropped by.
Absolutely.
I,
Yes.
I've had
They're icons.
so many iconic costumes have come from
Yeah.
Colleen Atwood's mind, Milena
And
Cananero.
still do. And still do. They keep going, these
Hey,
ladies.
absolutely. But Milena Cananero, I've learned a lot about color through her work and silhouette. Adrian, Jenny Egan. Like, there's so many people that I think are doing
Mhm.
brilliant work now that I still feel like I'm a fan of costume designers. When I go to these, Costume Designers Guild Awards or parties, I'm a fan of so many people in those spaces.
That's amazing. Well, thanks so much for sharing it. I know I put you on the spot a bit about that.
That's okay. I'm happy to.
Uh, so my next question is, we want to talk about this show, Little House on the Prairie. Now, I grew up watching the show because I'm
Mhm.
that old. In fact, I actually shared a picture on Instagram of myself, sort of wearing a bit of a Laura Ingalls inspired dress that my mom made for me in the 1970s.
Absolutely.
It was so fun. But anyway, so what about you? Did you revisit, the book series, the beloved book series, or did you look at the original series at all? Or did you just say, hey, this is my own thing. I want to look at it from a fresh perspective. What approach did you take?
Well, I had read the books as a child, like so many of us. Like sometimes they're assigned reading. My personal experience was I was at that age when book sets were really interesting, like when they came all together in this all the spines in different colors. I liked the idea of that, and so I went to my little, public library, and I found that there was this series of books that came in the box, and I thought that was really exciting. And then the world totally pulled me in. So I got to know Laura's story as a child, but then I had to revisit it for this job. So I went back and I did the audiobooks because I'm an audiobook person, and I feel like I can, for my job, I can get a lot done with my hands and my eyes if I have my AirPods in with books. So that's how I revisited it as I was preparing for season one. But in terms of the original series, I didn't. I mean, I'm certainly aware of it. Who is not aware of it? I think we've all had, like, we've been sent home from school sick in junior high school and watched 7 episodes that day, or it's just kind of like this pervasive idea that's been around forever, and it means so much to people as a result. Um, with that in mind, it was very important to create something brand new that was very much inspired by the books, but also just inspired by the scripts that our writers had written, because it's an adaptation. It comes from a fresh place. It has new ideas on the story. And in the same way that Laura Ingalls, this was a recollection of her time. The scripts are sort of the same thing, where it is like it's a look back at a time, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not a one for one remake. It's not a copy. It's definitely coming from a new set of creatives, and I wanted to make sure that the work felt like it was a part of that and not an echo of something that had happened previous.
Thank you for that answer. That was really well put. So the adaptation, it's described as being through the eyes of Laura Ingalls. Is that correct? Just from your notes, I think I got that. So when she discovers new lands, new people, and her own place in the world. So how did that perspective influence your costume design choices?
Well, I had so many questions when I was starting. Like, are we doing historical accuracy? Are we doing an interpretation? Are we doing an expansion? Are we doing a fantasy? Where is our center of gravity going to be for the visual language of this show? And where we landed is that in the way that Laura has written this sort of like nostalgic look back with some exaggeration, we felt like the costumes could do the same sort of work, where it is firmly grounded in a sense of historical accuracy, but also its job is to be a part of the storytelling. So, I studied like crazy, what dyes were being used, what fabrics would be used, what silhouettes were realistic. What sort of year are we going for, right? Because our girls' ages are slightly different than was written to the books, or so all of that needed to be combined to be the foundation that I could design on top of. But it was all done through Laura's eyes. So how would Laura remember this, right? I think if you're a child who grew up with either wealth or poverty, you don't really know that as you're growing up in it. You sort of just remember things fondly because that's your childhood. And so we wanted the costumes of the show to have that same sense of childlike wonder or fondness about how things were worn or what was given to them or how creative their parents were. So I think all of that is peppered into the design for this series.
Yeah, because I'm going to skip this next question because you sort of answered it. But I understand that almost all of the clothing was handmade using techniques of the era, which I'm not sure exactly what those techniques are. Like, is it hand sewing? Do they have some type of machine sewing?
There's a tremendous amount of hand sewing that's done on the show. I mean, the sewing machine is invented, but it's not often available. And so we have old school singers right over here in our workroom.
I've used one of those before.
Oh
is it one with a trundle?
Yes. And
I love that. Amazing.
We have another we call Chitty Chitty Bang Bang because it's so noisy, it's unbelievable, but it does beautiful work that feels period. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like part of the charm of Little House is that it's people who have a lot of time, but not a lot of resources. And so how can you take simple materials and simple techniques, but expand on them with some creativity and some time and some effort? I have this backstory in my brain about what would a woman who really loved her children and wanted to give them the world, like what would she make for them if she only had cotton, right? I think like any mother, she would want her daughters to have a more beautiful life than she was growing up with, or try to pass down some sense of expansion. And so I wanted Caroline to be able to do the same thing for her girls. And so we would look at fashion plates at the time in the same way that Caroline Ingalls would. I have right here, I reference this quite frequently, but it's Goody's Lady's Book from 1868.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
It's like, Caroline would have had access to books like these. And I think that she would have been inspired by them. And how can I she would look at a fashion plate or a woman's costume from a ball and think like, wow, how beautiful is that, and then try to do it through modest means. So that's sort of that's sort of how I want the clothes to feel. It's that handmade feeling of something beautiful.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed that you did a lot, and I thought it was really interesting, is rather than seaming the pleats into, like, say, the yoke, you had them sort of external. Was that something that you saw a lot? Like you came across an extant garment or something, you're like, oh, that's a cool idea.
I did. There's actually a dress. I think it's either at Sturbridge Village or it might have been at the museum in Minnesota. But I saw it on a real garment, an extant piece, and I just thought like it's subtle, but it's expressive and it's feminine, and there's always that balance between like practical clothes for the period or this sort of like ethereal feminine feeling that we could put into the clothes. And so it's little modifications like that they come from the period. And I just felt like our show wanted that little bit of a lift. It wanted that optimism, not necessarily that sense of gritty reality,
Hmm. Now, speaking of that, so I can't even imagine the amount of research that you'd have to put on this. You must have done like mood boards and like, I don't know, ton of research. But so where did you look? You were mentioning some museums. You said, Goodies or Goaties. Is it Goaties? Goaties Book of Fashion?
I've heard both.
Good.
I personally
Okay.
say goodies, but I definitely hear both.
So what other things did you look at? Did you look at photographs, diaries, like
I found some
historical
of the
records?
Heidi, some of the best research I found came from women's diaries and journals from their
Hmm.
journey west, because it's a very personal record, and at the same time as you're getting someone's emotional experience, which I keep saying that's the heart of my design here, is this emotional experience of what this would have felt like. So I felt like I had their voices in my head about what it really felt like, not necessarily what it really was in photographs. So it's kind of blending journals, photographs, um, catalogs, books like Peterson's, Goodies. Then I would study extant garment. I would love to get my hands in a pair of white gloves and really study something the way that it was made so that I can understand it inside and out. Um, and so it was a combination of all of these things. Like one of my favorite kernels of research was this woman's diary. She was making her way across on the Oregon Trail. So a slightly different period, but the same sense of fear that would come from going into something really unknown like that. But she was talking about this battle that she had with her family about bringing her hoop skirts, because to her that was how she wanted to express herself. And I don't think she had a sense of who she was going to meet along the way, but I think she had a sense of how she wanted to look when she met them. And it's a super impractical idea to bring your hoops in your wagon, but it was really important to her, and I liked that detail because it told me a lot about those people. Like, they wanted to feel well dressed. They wanted to be perceived like they had a sense of themselves and a sense of style, or they'd come from a place that had a certain amount of expression. And so that was something that I really carried with me. And there's that only comes from a woman's diary. There's also things that come from extant garments, like the little micro ruffles that we've talked about, or the
Hmm.
kid plates of polished cotton on the inside of the dresses, or recollections that women would have about their childhood, where their parents would add extra tiers of ruffles because their dresses had gotten too short as they grew. Or
Yes, of course. Yeah.
I really wanted moments of barefoot because there's so many photos that show you children who didn't have shoes. That becomes a production issue as you're running through nature to have your feet uncovered. But the inspiration is there across medium. And the other thing that I really studied quite a bit, Heidi, was quilts. Because quilts would have often been made of textiles that had been worn through, like, your father's shirt that the elbows have blown through. They would take the elements of that uh, clothing and turn it into quilts. So I would look at quilting to try to understand what textiles were happening at the same time, what prints were happening. Because if you only study catalogs or fashion plates, you don't really get a sense of what was being worn, right? Because things are backdated, or things get worn for a lengthier amount of time than just a few years on the prairie. But the great thing about quilts is that they're often layered. So you'd be able to sort of go back in time and look at, this was the face of the quilt, but underneath it, there could be a decade's worth of art underneath those layers. So it kind of felt like being an archaeologist, where you could really dig back into the period and understand it a bit better than any photo would really tell you.
Yeah, actually, that brings me to a question. So, where did you source your textiles and your cottons and all the fabrics that you used in the show? Did you have them printed? Did you have a source that you went to?
The answer is everywhere all at once. Like it was,
Like the movie.
yes, yes. Um, Shirley Carrada.
Yeah.
It's the challenge that is hard for people to understand is the volume of clothes that we produce, because we're working with young actors, which means that they're kids. They, in between takes, they want to climb a tree and have a popsicle, and they're kids. They get dirty, they spill, right? So you have to have at least doubles or triples for the actors. And then you're having sometimes a riding double, sometimes you're having an adult stunt double, sometimes you're having a photo double with two multiples. So for every Laura dress or Mary dress or Good Eagle dress that you
Mhm.
see on camera, we have sometimes created between 8 and 12 dresses of that. So just from a place of
Wow.
sourcing, right, you might be able to find the most historically accurate textile in the world, but I can't really do much with 8 yards of it. I need 40 yards, 60 yards, 80 yards of this printed cottons. So the
Mhm.
sourcing is challenging just in terms of its volume. So what I ended up finding, the best relationship I ended up figuring out was with Marcus Fabrics, and they print a lot of quilting cottons, but they work with a lot of historians and textile enthusiasts who have studied the period. So I have some personal favorites because the color palette is there, the prints come from extant garments, and so I'm able to create the volume of dresses I need in the correct print, in the correct palette, and then it doesn't need a ton of work on top of it in order to feel authentic to the period. So it's a huge challenge. I think a lot of a lot of our audience are like hobbyists or reenactors, and so I think the sense of creating a dress comes from the idea of creating one dress over the course of a year or something like that. But on a television production schedule, we're creating hundreds of dresses over the course of 10 days. It's a Herculean effort, and I'm supported by a tremendous amount of artisans here, which I'm really grateful to. But I wish I could show that process a little bit for people, just to understand how much we produce on a tight timeline.
You could do a TikTok.
I know I need to do a reel or something about it. Yeah.
Exactly. No, I can't even imagine, like, when I saw the show, I was like, "Oh my god, this is 1 season," and of course, I mean, you will have a foundation now that you're on to season 2, but I was like, just to start off with that many looks, because actually in the original show, if someone can correct me if I'm wrong, I think Laura and Mary, and maybe even Ma and Pa, had 1 outfit,
Mhm.
and then they had a Sunday best, and that was it, if I
Yeah.
recall. So whereas here,
It's
you have multiple costumes per character, plus all
we
the
do.
figurines.
We do, but our season 1 takes place over the course of 18 months. So
Mhm,
it's a lot longer of a duration than
mhm.
the original television series. But the other thing too, I think it's a bit of a misnomer, and it's sort of a Hollywood myth that people only had this one thing. When you look at packing lists and you realize what people were bringing in their trunks, it's not one dress and one Sunday best. It feels, I think it's a romanticized version of the West, like how gritty and hard it was. But I think that's a little bit of a myth that Hollywood has perpetuated.
Oh,
I
yeah,
think it's really
for
not.
sure. Yes, absolutely. By the way, one of the things I did love in the Christmas episode is that the girls got gifts of dresses from their mom. Then she would have been up late at night, like probably with candlelight, making these dresses. So I thought that was a wonderful like storyline. Um,
That's a credit to
mhm.
Mitchell Wolf and Aileen Abercrombie. They designed the Christmas episode. I wasn't able to be here for that portion of our shoot, so that's a total credit to them. I thought they did a beautiful job, and they're such a part of the Little House story. I mean, they have Aileen has been an assistant on my team for a decade, and Wolf is probably very close to that. So they've been a huge part of the Little House story, and I was really happy that they got an opportunity to design an episode.
Amazing. Now, one of the things that I had in the notes from you is that Mother Nature is a collaborator. There's a beautiful palette happening here, right? So, in your design process, you used wildflower palette for the
Mhm.
Ingalls family. Can you talk a little bit about how landscape influenced the colors and textures? And also, like, you've got this amazing like backdrop for them, right? Like, just some of these. I just was going to show some of these pictures that you have. Just that you're working with. So did you want to talk a little bit about the palette for the clothing that they wore?
Absolutely. I think I can speak to you directly, Heidi, because you've been to Winnipeg. But my
Yes.
experience coming to Winnipeg, I truly felt like I was the Ingalls. Like I got here, a show like this had not been made in Winnipeg or at this scale or with this many cutters working in the same place. And so
Mhm.
I needed to create a community that could build with me and that could support the work of this show. But that meant coming here in sort of the end of winter. So there was no green, there was no color here. It was sort of in that barren winter brown gray
Oh, it's awful.
phase. Um, and it was bleak. It was sort of a stark contrast for me to get here and be like, wow, we're shooting a little house on the prairie here. Like where is the prairie? But the prairie started growing and it revealed
Mhm.
itself to me. And I found that process really inspirational as I tried to develop a color palette for the show. And
Yes.
so, as time went on and as the prep got closer to shooting, the green showed up, and then the purple showed up, and these little yellow flowers, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, the prairie is revealing itself to me. Like this is what it wants to be. And I
Mhm.
think to try to put a spin on it wouldn't have been as honest as just sort of listening and watching it reveal itself and then putting that into the clothing. Um, but there's also a sense of history that the palette has come from, where it's like, dyes weren't as color fast at the time, and so we liked this idea that Mary would be drawn towards purples and blues, but those dyes are they fade really quickly, especially at the period that we're working with, and so like most families, the clothes would be hand-me-downs for the children. And so I wanted Laura's dresses to almost be like simpler, younger versions of what her sister would have had at the time that the dyes have sort of pulled out of. And so that was a way to create a bit of a palette too, whereas there was a sense of history to it. There was this like the high points of it were Mary, right, where she's like begging her parents for the most beautiful prints that she can find. And by the time they make their way
Mhm.
to Laura, they've sort of desaturated and they've gone to a more earthy place.
Yeah. I just love it actually, I love it because I was saying this to somebody else in another interview recently that a lot of shows now they use like a lot of filters and everything is so dark and everything, but I don't know if they did, but just everything feels like so natural. Like I was saying, it's very cinematic looking and just having the prairie behind them and the big sky as well, right? You've got these beautiful, like look at this picture of
Mhm.
Charles, just this beautiful big sky behind him. So you just have, so much like all of that nature to sort of work with. And also, the flower crowns, which I love too, that the girls are making when they're traveling. Like
It's
here is a
all it's
picture.
all romantic, right?
Mhm.
That is the ethos of the show, and it's the ethos of I think some of the writing is that it's a romanticized version of a childhood. It's
Mhm.
finding beauty in memory, and it's finding an expressiveness. And it's also, especially for season one, season two is very different. But season one, there was like a loneliness to the prairie in the beginning, where, like the shot that you just showed is the girls and
Mhm.
their underpinnings, but there's no one around, right? So there's like a wild nature to it, right? A young girl would never wear these underpinnings in the
In public.
outside of
Yeah.
her family, really.
Mhm.
But when the wilderness is your backyard, it gave us a bit of a freedom to find that these girls were at home in nature, right? So things that we might only see in a bedroom for a different family, this is home for these girls, and there's no one that they're going to bump into unless they go to town.
Yeah. Now okay, so this is something that's really I loved about this show is the presence of the Osage, which is pretty much absent. Maybe I to be honest with you, I don't remember it being in the original series at all. Maybe later seasons. So did you want to tell me a little bit about the Osage in this series? And also my understanding is that you had 100 Osage artisans working on the show, including moccasins, ribbon work, leggings, beading, shirting, and jewelry. So would you mind telling me a little bit about that? I have a few pictures here I can share.
It was honestly such a privilege to get to work with these clothes.
Mhm.
But it was also a massive undertaking because it's not, I mean, the show is a massive undertaking to begin with. But,
Of course.
I think for any costume designer, if you're going to take on a Western, Men's clothes, you can rent. There's a variety of places that the men's clothes can come from. But for women's wear, there's not as much out there that's available, and certainly not for a younger age group. So you're limited at the get-go. But to include the storyline of the Osage, that's not really something that's been done before. So to take on the amount of clothing that we needed for this, I knew from the beginning, like, we have to start early. A lot of these elements are handcrafted. I mean, it just all takes time. And then to weather them to a place that feels appropriate for the Prairie, I mean, it was a really long on-ramp in order to get these costumes on camera. Fortunately, I had made friends with Julie O'Keefe during her run on Killers of the Flower Moon. She was their consultant. And I had a really wonderful lunch with her just because I was curious about the work. And that's sort of where the friendship began. And so when this came to my desk, I was like, there's no way to do this without Julie. She has to, I mean, I need that voice in the room. I need to understand things. I'm on the back foot of, she has years and years of producing clothing, manufacturing things. So I just needed to work with her. And so it slowly revealed itself. It sort of felt like this insurmountable amount of clothes. We had, this is the thing, Heidi, I feel like oftentimes when Indigenous people are portrayed on camera, it's sort of homogenous, and there's not individuals in this group of people. And so it was very important to me that we do this honestly. And, it's all there. If you look at historical photos, like, there's individuals. It's not a uniform. There is self-expression, there's differences in age, there's differences in style. And so I wanted the Osage to be done the same way. So you have to produce that in small groups. You can't just take it to a place and produce, 70 of something, right? So I started with Julie. I explained what we needed to do. There was one sequence of the Osage returning from their, they would hunt buffalo in the summer, and then they would return to this land that the Ingalls have now built their home on. And so I always said, the whole show is seen through Laura's eyes. So as Laura looks at the Osage returning home, it needs to feel like awe-inspiring. It needs to feel like a parade, right? It needs to feel like there's so many details that she's trying to take in, things that she's never seen before. And for some of our audience, maybe they've never seen these things either. And so I wanted that same sense of childlike wonder of seeing this culture return to their home and just be jaw-dropped by it, which took a lot of work. I mean, we had to, all of the roaches that are worn on their heads, they're made from porcupine and deer tail that's dyed, and bandoliers and hair pipe breastplates and leggings with ribbon work, and there's just so many elements that go into creating the look of the Osage, which is largely unchanged still. But it just involves so many different artists, because no one place can take on the amount of work. We have jewelry to be made, metal to be worked, beading to be done, tanning the hides, building the moccasins, beading the moccasins. There's so many steps to the process. So I just, like, we sent up the call that we needed as many Osage hands on this project as possible. And luckily their generosity was so overwhelming. They were really willing to be a part of their storytelling here. And a lot of my job was to listen and learn as fast as I could. And just try to be as authentic as possible with getting these characters on screen. So I think in the end, we had about 100 people working on this with us, more FedEx tracking numbers than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, because they're all over the place, I'm assuming.
Between
they're not with you
at different stages of projects, one person building a vest, beaded by somebody else, sewn by a different person, with ribbon work from a third person added into the mix. So it was like air traffic control, trying to get everything where it needed to be on time. But what a privilege, right? So we had that sequence of the Osage returning home. We had some elements just seeing like women out foraging, which is a completely different look. Good Eagle and her family, another completely different look. Then we have the council meeting where these chiefs are arriving to deliberate this very important decision for their tribe. And so it was such a pleasure, really, to try to figure out how do all of these different sequences add up so that there is a a visual narrative so that you understand where these characters come from, but you understand the extremes of these different scenarios that we're seeing them dressed for.
Mhm.
Um, all that to say, a tremendous amount of work shared by many, many people.
I can't even imagine. It's overwhelming. Just thinking about it. I was gonna say, I actually, when I interviewed the co-designer of 1923, she was telling me she dressed all of the indigenous characters in there, and they were actually really helpful. Did you find that the cast were helpful in like how they would wear the clothes and if themselves? Were you able to sort of lean on them a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, it was, as I said to you, I was listening and learning the entire time. I still am. And so it was great to work with, like for our chiefs, for example, they have worn traditional Osage dress since childhood. So
Hmm.
they bring an eye to it. Or, Julie would be in the fittings with us. We also had Lainey Maker as a part of the fitting process. She was creating a lot of our ribbon work, but then also dressing some of our extras, some of our chiefs, because there are simple things that need to be right for, our Osage audience has to look at this and understand the story that's being told. So the way that a blanket gets worn, right, it could be
Yeah.
inappropriate for somebody's age, or the amount of jewelry, or what sort of shells something is made of might be telling the wrong story. So in fittings, there were certainly moments where people would say, I have this picture of my great great grandfather, and or it actually really did happen, Heidi. One time we were had this reference image for one of our chiefs, and he said, "Do you realize that that is my relative?" Right? And
Oh
so
my gosh, that is so cool.
direct line from research to performance, which was like incredible. Um, but yes, there is a history that you're catching up to put on camera, but also a wonderful back and forth where, it has to be authentically Osage, but it also has to be camera ready. The clothes that we put on camera are treated differently. The colors are worked so that they make sense for a cinematographer. But it was a really giving experience in many directions, and it was a really educational experience constantly. And it was an experience that was filled with a lot of pride, a lot of dignity, and just a lot of communication.
By the way, this is totally off topic, but my father, when he retired, he went back to university. He went to U of T and he studied indigenous culture, or Aboriginal studies. And he
Mm.
ended up he started working on his PhD on longhouses. So when I saw the longhouses
Wow.
in the show, I was like, oh my gosh, because like my dad had made a model and he did like a thesis on it. So my father's not indigenous, by the way. He was just really fascinated by it. So he was very welcomed into the indigenous, like in Ontario, it's actually, we have Algonquin and Iroquois, and that's the cultures here. So, but I just wanted to say that when I saw the longhouses, I was kind of excited.
I was really, Heidi, it was really exciting to be a part of, if we're going to tell the story of America, this is it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right. So I loved that the storytelling had for this little house had a lot more balance to it. I loved that it answered some questions that had gone unanswered. I loved that it was a slightly confrontational at times, as it should be. Right. This is a part of American history that uh, needs to be investigated a little bit more. And I hope this series can help educate people who didn't have that understanding. I hope that this can be part of their learning of how America was made.
Now, one of the things that, sorry, I wanted to just touch on before I have to let you go is, so we've got some differences of classes, right? So we've got the folks on the prairie, the people who have traveled to claim their land and build on it, like the Ingalls, and then we have the more affluent people, but also we have some racism in the town as well, and we have the storekeeper, and then we have the doctor. So did you want to touch a little bit on how you sort of costume to distinguish those different sort of groups of folks in the show?
Yes, I was often talking about the culture clash that was happening in America at this time, and there's so many influences coming together in these new towns. I mean, all of these towns
Hmm.
were not that uh, hadn't been developed that far back. There was a new feeling to a lot of these spaces. So in the same town, you might have money coming from Baltimore, where things were
Hmm.
pretty established and gilded, and folks who could afford a lot of what they brought out. They would bring their furniture, they would bring their frames, they would bring their dresses, their hats, but it was tied to a city that, all of these things would have made sense in Baltimore, but they don't necessarily make sense in Independence. You had the influence of the French coming from Louisiana or Canada, converging in these places. You're starting to feel the influences of Mexico make its way north. All of these things are sort of happening at the same time, and the clothing is a visual result of these conversations and the trade that's available at the time. Particularly with the Osage became really attracted to the ribbons that were being imported from France, and they started manipulating it in a way that's uniquely their own. But these ribbons were produced for ladies' hats, but they are now distinctly Osage through a different craft. So I think that's a really exciting part of the storytelling, that back and forth between these two different types of people. But then you also have, we're not that far away from the Civil War, so there are incredible prejudice that are really, really at the surface level here in this country. And, for a character like Dr. Tan, it's really important to showcase what a freed man looks like at this time, and the way that he would want to communicate that to people who, as I say, we're not that far from the Civil War here. There was a lot of intense feelings about this, and it's important that somebody with his education and his background be able to communicate that to people before he's had the chance for a conversation about himself. And so Jocko and I worked really closely to try to figure out what are the elements that are going to dictate this man's station in life. How do they make sense in the prairie? Where would he have come from? So that's a part of that storytelling. And in the same way, for Emily, who is our shopkeeper, there's all of this amazing history of women, men who were store owners, right, who had a good living in the expansion of the West. And so same thing for her. We wanted to show that she had access to trades and goods things that might not necessarily make it to all of the homes in Independence, but she had access to things that were really quite beautiful in the end. And so her jewelry is a little bit more expressive. Her buttons are a little bit more elegant. She has glass buttons on cotton, just things that I feel like they would have excited her and made her enthusiastic as she was starting to stock the store.
By the way, I love the doctor's coat that he wears. It's sort of like a linen over a topper kind of. I don't know what you would call that.
Duster.
A duster. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. But it's sort of, I think you have it specifically to him. I don't think any other characters are wearing it.
Well, I liked the feeling that for, a part of designing for this series,
when he's working, I suppose.
Well, it was certainly meant to cover your clothes from the dust and the duster, right? It's a split in the back so you can ride a horse. It's a really practical garment, but it has echoes of a lab coat for those of us who view lab coats as
that's what I sort of took from it. Exactly.
And intelligence and authority. I really liked that it was a little bit of a blend between something familiar to a contemporary audience and something authentically period for people who understand that too. I try to design for a wide range of our audience. I need to make sure that the Osage audience feels that the costumes have been handled appropriately. I need to make sure that an audience who doesn't really watch period pieces understands the differences of characters or stations or economics or backgrounds. And then I need to have an audience who can probably build their own clothes because they're involved in the reenactment communities. I need them to be able to watch this and have an experience that feels like it spoke to them as well. So it's there's a lot of voices to feed on Little House specifically.
Listen, while we have a couple of minutes left, I just want to touch on the fact that you had the original Nellie Olson. Sorry, I don't know the actress's name. I spotted her right away. What would you what would you call this? A downtrodden character, hard on times? Like I don't know how you would describe her character and the people that she's hanging out with. They're not very good people.
They're not very good people, but that is also the truth of the West. Well, sometimes
it's dangerous.
It as idyllic and romantic. She also describes it as a really harsh place that was full of danger right around the corner. And that's sort of the thing about the West, is that it could be great and then it could be bad really, really quickly, depending on what sort of camp you walked into, how the weather changed. And so this was a bit of a way to show that the West, while we're showing you beautiful homes with carved furniture, there are also people who are living really at a baseline poverty, trying to make their way west. And there were people who expected family when they got there, and the family wouldn't have been there, or people who
Mm.
didn't plan that well and sort of fell on hard times. And so, to speak to Allison a little bit, I mean, she was delighted. She'd gone from playing Nellie Olson in the original series. You know, she was in the biggest bows you've ever seen on the back of her
Oh
head,
gosh, yes. And the curl, she had like
braids,
ringlets.
silk, and all this stuff. So it was a really fun journey for her to get to tell the complete antithesis of that storyline. So she was such a
Yeah,
she was down for all of it.
that's
She wanted her
awesome.
sheets to be dirty. She wanted rags. She wanted all this stuff,
I
and
love
so
it.
she was a real pleasure to
Yeah.
get to outfit for
And of
sure.
course, as a Canadian, I also recognize Megan Follows. You had her playing Laura's grandmother in a sort of a, well, she was in a fever dream, I suppose you would call it.
Yeah.
So that must have been really nice to have her come on as well as a day player.
Yeah, she brought such a rich history to shows like this, the period. You know, she was so she had a way of carrying herself that you can really only get when you've had like years and years of period costume. She just knew how to carry dresses. A lot of the time I'm working with younger people who have never worn anything like this. You know, they come to their fitting in Crocs, and then we're teaching them how to lace a corset and lace up your boots with a button or
That's so funny.
on your boots and things. So it was almost the exact opposite experience, where she brought such a history to it, where she needed very little help from a costume department. This is something that she knows in and out. But they're also, I'm a fan, right? I have loved watching her, and so I knew how the audience would feel getting that reveal, and so I was like, we got to give them the straw hat. We got to give them.
Oh, of course, yes.
Right. It's like I like to be in on it for sure.
Yeah, actually, I was going to tell you the first movie I ever saw her in. I think it was Boys and Girls, and it was a period film, if I recall, and I saw it in high school. So she was probably like a little girl in that. It was probably like one of her very early works. So and then of course everyone knows her as Anna Green Gables. So. Well, anyway, I can't keep you much longer, but I just wanted to ask you a little bit about season 2. And I mean, this is exciting. You're on set right now. You're in your it's your fitting room or your wardrobe.
Headquarters.
So without giving anything away, is there anything you're particularly looking forward to exploring from a costume perspective in this season?
Well, it's revealed, this isn't a spoiler alert, that we're introducing the Olsens this season. And
oh, yes, I did read that.
What's exciting is that a lot of the season is a little bit about the haves and the have-nots. And so the visual world has exploded, it's expanded. We're in a much more developed place than we were in Independence. I'm being careful. I'm looking at things that I can't really talk about, but there's an expansion of ideas in all directions. There are much more examples of social class across the board. There are many more resources in this town. It's not that same like one store kind of a place. So there's a real like forward feeling momentum to season 2 that I feel like
is there a Miss Beadle or the new school teacher that will be are you allowed to share that or
I don't know.
okay.
Probably
okay.
I don't.
I just assume we have the church. I'm assuming we're going to have school. Okay, so we have some things to look forward to then.
There are many more opportunities for costumes, specifically, because there are many more worlds that we get to be a part of. It's not just the wilderness and the town. There are many more settings. I'll say that.
Okay. Well, that's fair enough. Well, Mitchell, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it also because I know you're working and you took this time out to do that. But anyway, I just want to tell everyone, go watch Little House on the Prairie. It's on Netflix right now. All episodes are out. You will not be disappointed. It's wonderful. It's been doing very well, by the way, critically acclaimed and getting lots of accolades. So kudos to you and your whole team. Amazing.
It's a really wonderful crew up here. It's a lot of really hardworking people who love the show, love the books, and are giving it their all, truly. I mean, it's a really, really hardworking crew. And we like trying to live up to the bar that I think the show and the books have set.
Wonderful. It was funny because my friend Carlos Rosario he's in Vancouver doing Shogun, and
Yeah.
you're in Winnipeg doing a Little House on the Prairie. So we've got all these two wonderful properties being brought to a new set of eyes, a new audience. So it's wonderful. I was so excited, by the way, when I learned that they were doing it. So when I had this opportunity to talk to you, I was just thrilled. So.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone. And everyone who's watched today. I really appreciate it. And have yourself a wonderful day. Thanks, Mitchell.
Thanks, Heidi.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Okay. I'm going to end the recording.
Great.
And then we're done.